I guess we'll start here. Buckle up. The country and the world are now experiencing what this is like. The first hours of the second Trump presidency happening right now. Donald Trump is at the U.S. Capitol. Soon he will head to that rally inside Capital One Arena. It's happening in place of the inaugural parade because of bitterly cold temperatures. Donald Trump is expected to take the stage there later in this hour. The rally taking place after this morning's events, a swearing in and a speech in which Donald Trump promised a golden age and depicted the America only as it exists on Earth, too. An endless series of cataclysmic events and catastrophes, weaponized government falsehoods, like claiming the Panama Canal is operated by China. The Panama Canal is not operated by China. And declaring drill, baby, drill. All of it is about as far as it gets from the normal self-imposed restraints on partisanship that you would find in any other inaugural address. Donald Trump also laid out a raft of day one promises and actions, things that are expected to be put into motion today. Executive orders, some of them amounting to stunts, things like renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. It's unclear to us if the president has the authority to do so. Others likely to trigger long and protracted legal fights. Donald Trump is expected to sign an order ending birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants. It will apply to children born to undocumented parents going forward. It will not apply retroactively, but it is likely to trigger what the New York Times calls, quote, one of the greatest challenges in the 14th Amendment's 157-year history. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution has ensured that anyone born in this country is an American citizen. It has been a fact of life for the lifetime of anyone living in the United States right now. And now, as part of his day one, Trump is, in effect, issuing a challenge to the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. That executive order on birthright citizenship is part of a group of other orders targeting the border, including declaring a national emergency. Now, that would allow Trump to deploy U.S. troops and force asylum seekers to remain in Mexico as their cases are reviewed. One of the very first things the new administration did was to shut down a government app. That app allowed migrants to schedule their appointments to cross the border at a port of entry. It's been used by almost 1 million immigrants. Coming fights over the border taking shape in the earliest hours of the Trump presidency. It's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. With me at the table, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, Alicia Menendez, is here. Also joining us, host of the Bulwark podcast, MSNBC political analyst Tim Miller's here. Also joining us, Democratic strategist and professor at Columbia University, MSNBC political analyst Basil Smykel's here. And former Democratic Senator, MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill's here. But we're going to start with my friend and colleague, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. He's outside Capital One Arena. Vaughn, let's start with the policies that are already in motion. Take me through what exceeds his now vast authorities as the President of the United States, and that's his desire to end birthright citizenship.
Nicole, over the course of the last 2 years, I know while so many of us were covering the 2024 presidential election and campaign, you were on the front lines of helping cover what was happening on the side of the Trump operation. And that were two particular organizations that were crafting, in the case of one of those organizations, they told me more than 250 draft executive orders that would be prepared for a President Trump to sign on day one. And there was Project 2025 with the Heritage Foundation and other organizations that wrote a 900-plus page playbook for every department and agency of the federal government about how to more efficiently operate and how to execute the policies that they feel like they failed to during the first Trump administration because they were ill-prepared and ill-equipped. That day is today. Donald Trump is now the president of the United States, and you said it. He is going to be making his way here to the Capital One Arena in a mere minutes to begin signing a series of executive orders publicly We are told that he is anticipated to sign more than 50 today, potentially up to 100, but more will be coming in the days ahead as they work on the final drafts of those. And in the case of the president-elect inside of the Capitol, just one example, he said that he will seek to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. What is that? It's usually a wartime resolution. It was last invoked by Franklin Delano Roosevelt as a means of apprehending Italians, Japanese, and German descendants in the aftermath of the Pearl Harbor attack. It allows the President of the United States to unilaterally detain, apprehend, and put into detention, and then ultimately deport any non-citizen above the age of 14 years old if he declares that the country of where that individual is from, in this case Mexico, is engaging in an attack on the homeland, the United States. Exactly what does he intend ultimately to do? Just how vast? Well, he's told us a mass deportation program. He said he'll target criminals to begin, but it's a question of just how far-reaching do those in ICE and the Department of Homeland Security and Tom Homan ultimately seek to use the executive order. The presidential powers are going to be put to the test by this president of the United States. He's also said that he's going to challenge the Impoundment Act, which obligates the executive branch to appropriate congressionally approved funds. They've suggested that they are going to all but take that to the courts as a means of cutting off funding for particularly environmental programs, for example, that were approved under the Biden administration. There are major executive orders that are going to challenge the bounds of presidential power, and that's all going to be coming to a head, not only in the hours ahead, but in these weeks ahead, Nicole.
Vaughn Hilliard, let me just drill down a little bit on what you're reporting. I mean, he described what's happening at the border as an invasion, and that's despite the fact that border crossings, I think, are at a near low for the last two presidencies, his first one and the Biden years. He talked about deploying the military to the border, if not the militarization specifically. But to use the Alien Enemies Act, those are wartime powers. Is he seeking a formal declaration of war from Congress?
That is a question, not only about the southern border, but also is his statement in which he explicitly said today from inside the Capitol that we, as in the United States, will take back the Panama Canal. Of course, that is the obligation of the Congress to approve wartime actions, but it's not clear from this now President of the United States how he will seek to use the Department of Defense. And frankly, we saw Pete Hegseth during his confirmation proceedings just this last week be very indirect and not explicit when asked by Democratic senators whether he would take orders from the President of the United States to use the military to, for example, attack Greenland or the Panama Canal, Panama, or use use military forces on domestic soil. And so I think there's a lot of outstanding questions. And ultimately, this is why the conversation about the extent to which Donald Trump has pledged to put loyalists in these positions is so crucial, because he is now in real time signing executive orders that would all but essentially, in his mind, provide him the powers to begin to put that all in motion and challenge the constitutional bounds that we have really not seen challenged in some cases, 70 years, 100 years, 200 years.
Vaughn Hilliard, you are part of, I think, a small group who understands Pence world as well as Trump world, because they were once one world. The history that was made today also includes Pence being there. I think he's the only former vice president who attended the inauguration of the president he once served to see a different man sworn in as vice president. Any sense of why he was there or what his experience was today, and why Mrs. Pence wasn't?
It is not clear why the former Second Lady Karen Pence was not there today, but at Jimmy Carter's funeral service just a little over a week ago, when Donald Trump and Melania Trump walked into the cathedral, she did not stand and shake either of their hands. Mike Pence, of course, is not the vice president. He was an unyielding defender of Donald Trump. And I went on 3 different international trips with him around this country. It was hard to find somebody who was more committed to Donald Trump than Mike Pence was. But ultimately, on January 6, 4 years ago, when he refused to reject the Electoral College votes, he was effectively dismissed from Donald Trump's orbit. And yet he made the decision to be here today. He congratulated Donald Trump when he won this this election, but he has also been on the front lines of criticizing him. For example, when Donald Trump announced that he wanted TikTok to allow to continue to exist, even if the Chinese parent company continued to have ownership of it. And Mike Pence, his former VP, just days before this inauguration, was suggesting that it was capitulating to Chinese national security threats. And so in Mike Pence, what does his political future look like? It's not clear, especially within his Republican Party. Yet at the same time, by coming here today, he respected the norms of the transfer of power and his former boss, and clearly somebody who continues to be involved in conservative politics going forward.